To another collaboration conversation where we talk about anything and everything that has to do with building cohesive, vision-driven teams, because this is where you unleash your impact. I am Casey Watts, Impact Coach and Consultant, and of course the host of this show. Now, today's show is going to get started in just a few moments, but I want to take a quick pause real quick for you to introduce yourself in the comments. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and what it is that brought you to the show. And then I also want to get really real with you and ask you a question. Okay, so here goes. Have you ever made assumptions? I'm guessing the answer is yes, because everyone has made assumptions, right? Have your assumptions ever led to either negative consequences or stagnancy? I'm betting that your assumptions more than likely have led to those things, because that is true for me. I have been guilty of making the assumption that when two or more people are gathered together, collaboration is naturally happening. Or I've made the assumption that when teams get along, they are generally productive and effective. And I've also made the assumption that because we're working together, clearly we all know the direction that we're moving. And that is just not true. Those assumptions have led to ineffective teams that are going nowhere fast. And I know that we want something different than that. We want teams who can thrive instead of survive. We want teams who are less dysfunctional and are more of the kind of team that they deserve to be a part of. These are the kinds of teams that can propel your organization and benefit not just the people who are on the team, but can benefit the organization as a whole, okay? And I want to tell you about something that can help them to get to this point where we're letting go of those assumptions and we're utilizing people well so we can work efficiently, productively, and toward a vision. I want to tell you about how you can build that cohesive, vision-driven team. Let me read to you first a quote from Christine Kane. It's one of my favorite quotes. To build a strong team, you must see someone else's strength as a complement to your own weakness and not a threat to your position or authority. Okay, but I want to dig a little bit deeper. Sometimes we have this surface level knowledge of what our strengths and weaknesses are. But how great would it be if you could dig down to a deeper level and truly understand everyone's geniuses, their God-given talent, the kind of work that brings them fulfillment, and because it brings them fulfillment, they are building capacity. And you know what? That built capacity helps your team to thrive. How wonderful would it be if your team members knew each of their types of geniuses, knew their working competencies, and knew their working frustrations? I am going to be providing all of that information in an upcoming Marco Polo Sharecast. We're going to be diving into the 6 types of working genius developed by Patrick Lencioni. And we're going to be thinking about how you can recognize, provoke, and cultivate those geniuses and support teams so that they are cohesive and all vision driven, so that you can propel your organization forward faster and better. I want to share all of this with you. If you want to learn more, you can go to bit.ly/betteryouBetterTeam. This will end February 28th, so registration closes February 28th. Be sure you get in before then. If you want to learn more, just put in the comments, learn more, and I will hit you up with more information. Okay, I'm excited to begin today's content. So if you are ready, drop a #ready and let's get started. Hey, everybody. How is it going? I see we have some people live with us right now, and I'm super excited. I want to know, first of all, I want to make sure that you can hear me. Hey, Amy, I'm so glad that you're here. I miss you, and I hope all is well. I want to know if you can hear me, so just give me a thumbs up or like say, yes, we can hear you in the comments. And I also want you to know that in this and in past lives and probably in future lives, you're going to hear me say, I'm super excited. I mean, it's just a habit. Like every time I get on here, I say, I'm super excited to be here, or I'm super excited you're here, or I'm super excited about the content. So, super excited is what comes out every time. It's kind of like when I have this habit of saying good morning. I don't know what it is, but even in the evening time, I will say good morning to people. It's just the talk about what we're here for in this live session tonight. It is titled Vision Casting and Scripting Critical Moves. And we're thinking about how to use maps, steps, and timelines to not only vision cast, but also to script their critical moves to help us to make change happen. A lot of the groundwork for this work that I'm going to be sharing today comes from or is rooted in the work of Chip and Dan Heath from the book Switch that we are reading in the Breakthrough Circle with Allison Peterson and so many other fantastic instructional leaders or instructional coaches. So if you're interested in that exclusive group, drop a learn more and I can get you more information, because we don't just read books that are this great. We read other books just like this that are phenomenal and truly help us to make change happen. So last week, I'm going to share some slides here today, and I'm going to try to zoom in to help you see some of them a little more closely, and then I will also zoom out just like this for some of them. But last week, the live session was all about how to leverage data to help teams move forward. Really, our goal last week in that session was to craft change stories by capitalizing on data reflections and making teams part of the success story. I linked that in the comments. If you don't see it, I'll try to link it again at the end of this show. But to think about that, accomplishing that goal, we looked through 4 different things. We talked about gaining perspective and perspective analogies. We thought about how to cast vision, how to script critical moves, and how to find the bright spots. And tonight, we are zooming and narrowing into really vision casting and scripting critical moves. Before we start tonight's episode, or before we really dig in, I want to know in the comments some changes that you feel like take place over the course of this year, or maybe there are some changes that are coming toward the end of this year, or maybe you are anticipating changes in the future. So put a type of change that happens in school environment specifically, but it really could be any organization. Drop a comment with that change. An example might be like new curriculum. That's pretty common change that happens. Or another change could be like different protocols. So just type in some different changes. And while you're doing that, I want to comment on changes. Some changes are big and some changes are small. Some changes are wanted by staff or teachers, and some are not. Some are requested by them, and some are not requested. Some changes are optional, and then there are those that, of course, are mandated. No matter which is true for the change at hand, change is almost always hard, right? Okay. So, I've got Michelle Rui here tonight. Hey, Michelle. And she says, this whole science of reading coming down the pike is absolutely a big change. Another change, schedule changes within the school made by upper administrators. Yep, you better believe it. And we got Allison Peterson here tonight. Hey, Allison, I just brought up our book that we've been reading in the Breakthrough Circle. So if you want to drop a link to how they can get more information about that, go for it. Okay. Yes, there are so many changes. We've got new curriculum, shift in leaders and teams, new buildings, merging of campuses, new programs, different lesson plan format, new standards, new state assessments. There are so many changes that we could list here, changes happening almost all the time. So that's why it's super important for us to be thinking about how do we vision cast and script critical moves when and if at all possible. But I want to start with focusing on the third surprising truth about change. And this comes from, again, the work of Chip and Dan Heath from the book Switch: How to Change Things When Change is Hard. The third surprising truth about change is that what looks like resistance is often a lack of clarity. And I want to talk about clarity tonight because really that's what vision casting and scripting critical moves is all about. It's all about bringing clarity to the work at hand. And it could be a project, initiative, or a change. And I want to start with clarity through the lens of a leader. And I was listening to a podcast this morning by Patrick Lencioni, and oddly enough, they were talking a little bit about change and like changing core values, which is a huge deal. And one of the questions that he was asked was, why are some leaders hesitant to bring clarity to a change? And here's what he said. He said they're worried, the leader is worried that if they try to bring clarity to a change or to something new, a new initiative or idea, that they're going to lose talent or they're going to gain unfair criticism, which then creates pain. And I would also add that there's hesitation for leaders to bring clarity around a change or an initiative because the leader is actually uncertain themselves about like the what, the why, or the how of the change. And I would say specifically the how, because vision casting is not something naturally done by everyone. For some people, it is just a natural gift. That is my strong suit. I specialize in vision casting for teams so that they can make change happen. Sometimes leaders just know that a change needs to be made. They're not quite, they kind of make this knee-jerk reaction to create the change. So here's an example of that. If more and more students are being added to tiers 2 and 3 instruction, a leader knows, oh my gosh, a change needs to be made. But the gut or knee-jerk reaction is to create this Band-Aid fix, this quick fix. And what they do is they begin to purchase and implement more programs for tiers 2 and 3 instead of considering, okay, how do we really ground ourselves in great tier 1 instruction and vision cast and script critical moves so that tier 1 instruction is happening? So the strategies and tools that I'm going to be talking about in this session tonight are really not just for leaders to use with teachers and staff, but it could be for the leaders themselves, or it could be for their leadership team, or it could be for the leaders of an organization and thinking, okay, where is our mindset about what needs to happen and how do we prepare for how to get where we're going? So these strategies and tools can be used and implemented with any change, big or small. All right, give me a thumbs up if you're with me. Let's dig into vision casting. So remember, I said, and I will probably say this a couple of times, vision casting and scripting critical moves go hand in hand. And you vision cast for yourself, the leadership team, and your staff. All of the people have to have vision casted for them. Cast for them. Casted is not a word, right? Someone check me on that. I'm pretty sure it's cast. We skip this step so often. I talked about this in the last session, but it is a crucial step. And I think sometimes we miss this step because we're crunched for time. But if you choose not to have time for this step, think about what you are making time for in the future, right? We're coming back to stagnancy and the same problems again and again and again. And if there's not clarity around a vision or a goal or clarity around a change and why it's happening, then no one can see where they're going, and they can't even see where they or how they belong in the organization or what role they play in moving it forward. But we're going to ask 4 questions to help us to vision cast. And those 4 questions are: where have we been? Where are we now? Where are we going? And how do we get there? One more time. Where have we been? Where are we now? Where are we going? And how do we get there? So many times you are going to hear people starting with where are we going and how do we get there? But we miss the first 2 questions. But it's so important to take a look at the past, the present, in order to help us determine what our future will be. I do want to clarify that some changes naturally elicit these questions and some changes do not. So, for example, turnover in your organization is inevitable, and that can be a sudden change. And it really wouldn't necessarily elicit these questions naturally. But most changes and initiatives can use these questions to help vision cast. Okay. And they are, what's so great about these vision casting questions is that they are cyclical in nature. They are asked continuously throughout any change, any project, any initiative. And they seem like really simple questions, right? But we have to remember, and I'm going to ask you to hashtag this. We have to remember that emotions are tied to these questions. And you can just hashtag emotions are tied. We can hashtag emotions are tied because emotions are tied to just about anything and everything. But emotions are tied to these questions. Everyone you ask these questions to are a part of the story of the organization, right? And each of their perspectives is different. So half the battle is inviting everyone to gain perspectives of all of these different stakeholders. In the last session that I did last week in the live, I talked about a lot about gaining perspective and inviting people in to gain perspectives of stakeholders. And I shared about perspective analogies. Absolutely go to last week's session if you want to hear more about perspective analogies. It's one of my favorite things. Okay. So I want to think about or talk about a scenario of change and implementing change for these questions. And the scenario that I'm going to consider is one that I feel like is pretty common for a lot of people, and that is small group reading instruction. More specifically, I want you to pretend that a team is about to embark on this change of implementing a small group reading structure and looking at instructional look-fors, or getting ready to consider instructional look-fors during small group reading instruction. Okay, so the first 2 questions we are going to dive into are: where have we been and where are we now? Remember, these are the 2 questions that I think we just kind of push right on by. We brush past them. We don't give them a whole lot of credit. We don't really even consider them sometimes. We jump into the change. We jump into where are we going and how do we get there? But let's really think about how wise it is to take a look at the past. And before you, or even as you're starting to ask these questions, you have to be sure that you have established a rapport, a relationship. You've had some deep understanding of the organization. You know the problems of the organization. You know the potential of the people, and you know the desires of the people. before you make assumptions about these questions. And this is where you're going to want to listen to the varying perspectives, because there's where you think the organization has been, and then there is where other people think the organization has been. So consider that you've got your perspective as the instructional leader. You've got the veteran's perspective. You've got the veteran who has been in that one organization for their entire teaching career. You've got the newbie who has very little experience. You've got the new hire who has been all of these different places and has a wide range of experience. There are so many experiences at hand, so many different perspectives, and you have to be aware of your assumptions as you were asking these questions. So this is where, and I will say too, these two questions I feel like are a little more quiet and reflective than the other two questions that we're going to jump into next, or they're less visible than the other two questions. This is where you might implement classroom snippets, listening tours, or feedback meetings, so that specifically around the change at hand or the initiative, so you can get an idea of where people have been and where everyone is now. And I will say, at the root of all three of these things that you could implement is just the need for people to be heard, because they want to feel as though they belong. They want to play a role in the story of change in the organization, and they do, right? They should belong. We want them to belong. We want them to play a role. So let's talk about these three things briefly. Classroom snippets. I have shared about this with instructional coaches for a long time, and the classroom snippets really could be implemented not just by instructional coaches, but any instructional leader, because the idea is that you are going into every single classroom very much like a walkthrough, and you are observing for that specific, with that specific lens. So if we're looking at small group reading instruction, the only time that I'm going in is during small group reading instruction. I have also titled this I have another slide here. I can't remember what else I've titled it. I think small groups at a glance is what I've titled it before, but it's truly classroom snippets. You go in 10, 15 minutes, you watch, you observe, they know that it's coming. And you simply leave one sticky note of positive feedback, and that's it. Only positive feedback. If you wanted to implement listening tours, this comes from the work of Sherry St. Clair, and listening tours are very much like classroom snippets, but your people know that you're coming in and you are just listening to gain understanding and perspective. You're listening to teachers, you're listening to students, you're listening to instruction, but you're also listening to their aches, pains, hurts, joys, things that bring them fulfillment. And this is very similar to feedback meetings, but feedback meetings would happen with a group of people, and you come together and you make this a vulnerable space where people are free to share their thoughts and concerns about the change, or their thoughts and concerns about, what's happening with that instructional practice. So if the goal was to craft instructional non-negotiables or look-fors in small group reading instruction, the classroom snippets and the instructional look-for, or the listening tours, the feedback meetings, they would all be focused on small group reading instruction, and they would allow teachers and staff to share their thoughts or dispositions about small group reading instruction specifically. Okay, so is that making sense? Give me some sort of feedback letting me know that, okay, yeah, I can see where these two questions, where have we been and where are we now, would be kind of imperative. All right, so you've asked these two questions, and again, they're more quiet than they are and in the background than they are visible. But now you're ready to ask the two questions: where are we going and how do we get there? And this is where the scripting critical moves comes into play. Before asking this question, though, what you will have done is gathered all of this information and data from the previous two questions, right, over a period of time. So, for instance, you may have implemented the classroom snippets and listening tours during small group instruction, and you may have realized that everyone had a different idea of what was expected of them during small group reading instruction. And sharing what you learn from the classroom snippets and from the listening tours, number one, you are being transparent and vulnerable yourself, but you also are being clear about what's happening in the whole organization. So sharing that information helps people to come around the new question of, where are we going? And this is as if to say, we all agree that there is a collective goal that we can work toward. Okay, then you can begin to cast vision for a proposed change, or maybe it's a mandated change, which is a lot more challenging to do because it's out of your control. And you are going to paint a preferable future and script critical moves using visuals such as timelines, maps, and steps. So this is where scripting the critical moves really comes into play. We want to make it visible to them. So these two questions are visible. Where are we going? How do we get there? All right. Last week, and let me zoom in for you. Last week, this is one of the maps that I shared. And in this map, this is where I strategically thought about data reflection maps to help people move forward, to help teams move forward. And in this reflection map, or I'm going to say just on this timeline map, but in this map, and you'll notice it's titled Data Reflection Map, the school was focused on implementing successful data reflection. So this really could have been called a data reflection cycle. You'll notice that there's the black print and then there's the pink print. The black print is what would be visible to teachers. These are the things that the teachers are doing over time to get from point A to point B. And point B would be like the very end of that. So I'm not sure if you can fully see that. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. Okay. So in the beginning, they're setting a purpose for data reflection. So where are we now? We're setting a purpose. We're developing norms for the work. That's where we are now. Where are we going? They are seeing all of the steps that are going to lead them to the end of this cycle where they're going to come back and have a successful reflection on data at the end and celebrate growth. So you'll notice there are things here that they're doing individually and things that they're doing here together. So if you want to hear more about this, again, go watch the last session about leveraging data to move teams forward. But this is casting a vision, but also scripting the critical moves. All right, let me show you what this graphic could look like if we were thinking about small group reading instruction. And remember, we're pretending that for small group reading instruction, the change is we want to implement structures like non-negotiables and instructional look-fors. All right, you'll notice that this timeline looks a little bit different. This timeline is a little more empty. You'll see that there are these pinpoints along the way. Those pinpoints represent 3 of the questions. The dark pink represents where have we been? The blue represents where are we now? This light pink represents where are we going? And there is not a pinpoint for how do we get there, because all of these little timeline lines that are coming off of the road, I don't even know what to call those, but anyway, all of those lines coming off of the road, that's how we're getting there. Those are the critical moves we're going to make to get to this end goal. I do want to go back to the last slide, and you'll notice, like, see at the very end of this timeline of this map where it says analyze and reflect on data and celebrate growth. That's what the teacher's going to be doing. The principal is offering partnership, questioning and facilitating. And look at the bottom in that blue print. It says determine instructional focus. So in this data reflection map, they've gone from point A to point B, having a successful data reflection. And they're getting to the end where they're reflecting on data again. The principal's going to be determining an instructional focus. And look at now the new map. Look at where they have been. They have been at a point where they completed data reflections. Okay, so it's almost like the map is starting over again. And now this map represents the campus's new instructional focus, and that is small group reading instruction. All right, so this is a little bit different than the other because it has these blank spaces. The idea here is that you are pulling in your people to help build this map or this timeline. So you know some things that probably need to be in place. And again, this is where that perspective analogies is so important. I highly encourage you to listen to the last episode about perspective analogies. But both perspectives, like instructional leader perspective and classroom teacher perspective, is necessary in order for the whole organization to get to that end goal. And if we leave some spaces open, we give teachers an opportunity to take ownership and think about, well, what could we say would need to go on this map or timeline that would help us collectively be successful, right? So if you will notice, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Right down here at the bottom, under like right after the pink, the dark pink, it says listening tours, classroom snippets. Then at the top, principal defined campus instructional goal. That's where we are now. You can say to them, you know what? We know that our school has the core value of a school-wide culture of consistency. We're not seeing that in our campus or on our campus right now, and that's evident from the listening tours. One of the things that we learned through our listening tours and feedback conversations was that you all, speaking to teachers, you all feel as though you are not sure what's happening in other classrooms and you don't know if you are meeting expectations. So we want to be sure that you get to go into classrooms to see other instructions. So we know we're going to put that on our timeline or on our map. We know we need to have common structures for small group instruction in place, and we want you to feel confident in that. Tell us what you believe will help us all to get there. And then together with teachers and leadership staff, you can build this timeline together. How much more powerful is it to build it together than to just put it out there in front of them? We want them to take ownership. Okay. And I realize, guys, like I'm looking this way on my computer because I'm looking at my video and I really should be looking here, but it's so awkward. Okay. So that's one way that you can script the critical moves and make the vision visible to them. I want to show you another way. And this is through steps. And it's very similar to a timeline, but it's just taking them through how many steps it's going to take to get to our goal. What I love about this is that you can add to it over time. So for example, you'll notice this says, what does the journey look like? And our journey, I like calling it a journey because we know that even when we get to our end goal, whatever that might be, guess what? There is always going to be another goal, right? Like change never ends. Our work never ends as learners. So if we can pull them into the journey, it's going to make it a little less intimidating than saying, we're going to go into this change because we know change is hard. So in these steps with this kind of timeline, you can show one full year and show them like a year is a long time, and there are a lot of things that we could do during this time. But I want to tell you 5 ways that we're going to try to get there together, or 5 things we're going to do to try to get there. So this could be an example of a small group reading instruction focus, where you're taking them through 5 things that we're going to do over the course of the year. So look at the beginning. It says small groups at a glance. So that would be the same thing as classroom snippets. Completed fall of 2021. Step 2, learning walks. Maybe that's where they are right now. Learning walks is where we are right now. That's happening March, whatever that says, 29th and 30th, and April 5th and 6th of 2022. Teacher-led PD. See what it says underneath that, where it says, next year. Is it okay that we didn't get to it, or it didn't happen, or it just kind of failed? Absolutely. Do we want to take it off the timeline? No, because we want them to see that while change is going to happen, there is flexibility, and we are going to move with the punches, right? So then step 4 says debrief. Step 5, co-construct goals and learner dispositions. This goes all the way from fall of 2021 to the next fall semester of August of fall 2022. Okay. So I want you to see, though, how this can be expanded in another year to come. This also shows how change takes time and can be hard. This is the next year, okay? What does the journey look like? The journey is continuing. This year, we're going to continue to script the critical moves by looking at the past and continuing into the future. Where have we been? Where are we now? Where are we going? How do we get there? How do we get there is all of these different steps that we're going to go through. This brings comfort to people to know what is coming and to know why it is coming, and to know, okay, how are we going to get there realistically? It may not relieve any anxiety in the beginning, but over time, if you can remain consistent in scripting these critical moves, it will alleviate anxiety and pressure and allow them to become a protagonist in the story of change. So you'll see in the last slide, we left off at step 5. In this slide, we're continuing with step 6 through 10. And when we get to step 10, that's the final goal of setting small group structures and instructional look-fors. Okay, tell me so far, what has stood out to you? We're coming to the end of this session, and I know I've given a lot to you, but I want to know what has really stood out to you, and what do you feel like has been most useful in this session tonight? Okay. As we come to the end, I want to tell you a couple of things. This session was all about scripting, critical moves, and vision casting, knowing that the two go hand in hand. So remember, the 2 questions, where have we been and where are we now? Those are your kind of behind the scenes question. You're laying the groundwork for making change happen. You're laying the groundwork for being able to ask the next 2 questions. The next 2 questions were, where are we going? How do we get there? Knowing that we have to take a look at the past in order to determine the future. And this is where we're going to make those 2 questions visible. And we are going to vision cast with maps, timelines, and steps. All right. The other thing I want to tell you is next Monday, not next Sunday. Usually I do my lives on Sunday evenings. Next Sunday, I'm kind of taking a break from lives so I can just hang out with my family. We're going to go to a basketball game. And instead, on Monday, which is March 6th at 6:30 p.m., we're going to have a Zoom session where you can come into the Zoom and we'll talk about how to create this vision casting tool together. It is completely free. All you have to do is register at bit.ly/createvisiontool. It's going to take you to a Google form, and you are going to let me know if you want to join, if you want to be added to the email list, and what kind of change you're hoping to create this visual for, and what you plan to do after you create this vision casting tool. Okay. I see several people who have jotted some things that I want to respond to. This person said, I can totally see that we have to know the answer to these questions and the different perspectives. Michelle said, love this graphic. Makes me think so much about several things going on at your school. Girl, I would love to hear more. You have to shoot me up. No, don't do that. Hit me up on Marco Polo. Words. I need to be more intentional with my 3-year plan. I'm almost there, but need to script more carefully. Intentional visions and carry through. Okay. I'm going to put in the comments the link to register for the live Zoom where we just have a working session together. And until next time, I will catch you guys later. Bye. I want to give a big thank you to you guys for tuning in, and I would love for you to do me 2 solid favors. Number 1, if you've enjoyed this or any other shows, please hit subscribe. I've got a lot of great guests and content coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. 2, if you know of someone who may be interested in building cohesive, vision-driven teams that collaborate well, share this show with them. And until next time, I want you to go off and have the great collaborative conversations that help you and the people you work with to completely unleash your impact. See you later.